I'm Ashton from Blockwest Capital for Investment Pitch Media and the Crypto Coin Show. And today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Boykey Sidley, author of Beyond Bitcoin, Decentralized Finance and the End of Banks. Stephen, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking the time to come on today.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. A lot's going on with the banking world right now and the rise of cryptocurrencies, and you have a lot of knowledge in the book. And there's a lot to talk about, but I'd love to just start by getting a high-level overview of what is Beyond Bitcoin, the book, and why did you write it?
Okay, so to start off with, the tagline of the book is Decentralized Finance and the End of Banks. And clearly, what I'm not trying to imply, me and my co-author Simon Dingle, is that banks are going to disappear entirely. It's metaphorical. It means banks are going to have to change, and they're going to have to change in a fairly painful shudder of reinvention. And that is because the technologies that were built specifically starting with Ethereum and the ability to write smart contracts, the people who took those smart contracts in hand and sought application for them, sought targets on the backs of financial institutions, banks, stock and bond exchanges, insurance companies, yield farming. There were all these major targets that were out there in which those people said, we can apply all the wonderfulness of blockchain technology stemming from Satoshi's paper and the smart contract capability of Ethereum, and we can do a better job of these traditional products and services offered by an industry which has become ossified, black box, and also the home of the financially powerful. So what I mean to say with that, we all experience this when we go to a bank. It's so built into the DNA of banking, we don't even question it. I'll give you a good example. If you have $100 to open a current account, a checking account at your bank, versus if you have $100 million to open an account at the bank, those two people will get treated differently. One of them gets their phone calls returned, one gets taken to dinner, probably gets taken out on the yacht, the other one has a hard time finding customer service. We don't even question that. So the playing field of the customer in the financial industry is those customers who bring the most profit to the institution get treated better than the other ones. That's just one of the examples as to why those people who grabbed the smart contract sought to build a better, fairer, cheaper, and more trustworthy system. In answer to your question is, why did we write the book? When we took a look at this, I've been involved in crypto for a very long time, since 2017, right around the time that MakerDAO and DAI came into existence. My partner, Simon, has been into it since 2011. And the reason we sought to write this book is, firstly, because it was lockdown, a pandemic, and we were both going crazy. And so I called him up and said, "Do you want to write a book?" And he said yes. But secondly, because it was evident that there was a gap. And the gap was, on one side, you had a bunch of incredibly smart people, starting off with Vitalik and then all the way to Hayden Adams and Hugh Karp and Andre Cronje and all these guys, very, very smart people doing very complicated systems. On the other side of the world, those people who read newspapers and magazine articles, you had intellectually curious people, and there was a gap in between. It was too difficult to understand how these DeFi projects operated. They are complex, they are a pain, the user interfaces are sometimes not as good as they could be. And we wanted to go through each one of the major projects, and that means stable coins, and that means the lend and borrow products like Compound and Aave. It means the DEXs, it means the Oracles, it means the decentralized insurance. We want to take each one of those projects and look deep under the hood and explain it in terms that an intellectually curious person could understand without having to have them go into white papers, which nobody reads except people who are technologically proficient. And we're addressing that gap. And by the end of reading the book, which is very, as I said, very accessibly and easily written, there should be a full and complete understanding of the DeFi landscape.
Wow. Incredible, Stephen. Thank you for that intro. And yeah, you're right about all of these great innovators, that are pretty active on crypto Twitter, posting about their projects, coding and developing the new financial system. It's almost like a foreign language to people that are, even people that are holding Bitcoin and they understand this is probably better than the banks, but what are these coders programming smart contracts with automation of the new financial system? It can get very complex. And you talked about the difference between somebody with a little amount of money and somebody with a large amount of money, getting treated completely different. And with DeFi, I find smart contracts they're not prejudiced. If you have a smart contract, you put funds into it, it's going to do what the contract says. So how in depth is the DeFi? Because DeFi is super important, and Bitcoin's been around for over 10 years, and DeFi didn't really emerge until less than half of that. And I feel like we're still so early as well. And it will probably be reiterating as we continue to go on. So how in depth do you need to get right now in terms of like a high level understanding of what these geniuses are creating and how it works? Or do you really just need to understand that it works as you would driving a car? You don't really need to understand the engine and how that works to be able to drive.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Look, first of all, most of the DeFi products are a reimagining of what is presented to you by a traditional finance world. So one does understand the concept of, deposits and loans, or lend and borrow, or the concept of using the exchange to find buyers and sellers of an asset. On the other hand, the engine that has been built by these DeFi pioneers are complex to manage. They're complex to wrestle to the ground. I've been around this since 2017, and about 2021, I went into Andre Conier's DYOR in order to invest some money, and I was flat terrified that I was going to do something wrong along the way, and my ether would be gone. They're not ready for prime time in the way that you can call your person at the bank and say, please open me a savings deposit. It's not that simple. Now, there are other headwinds, which I'll talk about in DeFi, but that simple issue of difficulty of use is because this industry is like 1 second old compared to the thousands of years, or at least since the Medicis in the 1300s, the first modern banks. That's 1,000 years until now. And this little industry has been around DeFi for probably about 6 or 7 years. You can argue what the start date was. My start date is MakerDAO, and DYOR was the real start. So those things which people consider to be barriers to entry for everybody are fast disappearing as user interfaces improve, as security improves. Then the only thing you read in the newspaper these days is that there was so much stolen from such and such a project that makes for sexy media. Let me talk about that for a while. That's one of the headwinds. There's the 681 poly hack at the end of last year. There was a 300 million one, I think it was Anchor, a couple of weeks ago. If you take a comparison of how much money has been stolen or grifted or hacked in the world of decentralized finance, it's about 15 billion this year. There is an estimate that in the traditional world of finance, there are trillions that are stolen and never seen. I'll give you one example. At the beginning of last year, a Danish bank got together with an Estonian bank and a bunch of Russian oligarchs who had a whole lot of money they wanted to move out of Russia, and they laundered $300 billion in one day. That doesn't even make headlines because everybody assumes that sort of stuff has been gone. The Panama Papers get opened, and there's this bank in Panama, and they find about all of these rich people who have been able to avoid paying taxes. That gets very little press, but somebody steals a couple of $100 million in DeFi, and all of a sudden it's headlines all over the world. Moreover, the security holes, because the software gets better and better, are beginning to close down. Blockchains have never been hacked, at least not Ethereum and Bitcoin. Wallets get hacked. Social engineering finds passwords. Front end of HTML interfaces into these systems get hacked. But the blockchains themselves are the hardest and most secure things around. And the smartest crooks in the world have obviously tried to hack Bitcoin and Ethereum, and nobody's been able to do it. There are clearly other headwinds. So I've talked about the difficulty of use element of it. And there are other elements of headwinds, by far the most important one being the regulatory headwinds. So what happens is you get this birth of an industry. First Bitcoin, so now you've got a parallel currency, and all of a sudden there's $1 trillion there. Second of all, we've got DeFi, which is now taking on not only the products that have been offered to us for 1,000 years by traditional finance industries, but also taking on central banks and saying we've got a better way to create money, We've got a better way to keep that money unsurveilled. We've got a better way to handle inflation through the 21 million Bitcoins or whatever. And all of a sudden, governments feel a threat coming. Their reaction to that regulation is probably the most interesting thing happening over the 6 months, because there is a wide spectrum of governmental reactions to the phenomenon. You get all the way from those countries which have tried to ban it completely. You go to jail, we're throwing you in a dark hole. If you ever mention the word Bitcoin or Ethereum, you're gone. You're going to jail. And there are plenty of those countries. All the way to the other extreme, where you get a country like El Salvador who says, I smell an opportunity here. I don't want to be under the boot of the American dollar. I'm going to make this a parallel currency, and we think this is a good thing. And in the center, you've got a whole bunch of different approaches to the regulation, tax regulations or monitoring regulations. You've got China trying to do a central bank digital currency, which has got nothing to do with basically the sort of things that excited us about the blockchain. It's got everything to do with surveilling their citizens. That regulation portion is incredibly important, because the institutions will not allow the institutional money to flow into DeFi until there is certainty about regulation. So somebody like me welcomes regulation, rational regulation, so that more money can flow into these better products.
Definitely. Great point. And you spoke there about how the hacks that have happened are in the media. The banks, they want to show that, because they're like, don't look over here, look over there.
Exactly.
Until it gets to a point where with regulation comes more control and more surveillance, as you spoke of, and then the banks can get in. How quickly do you see this timeline moving, where regular people that don't use cryptocurrency, that use traditional banking services, are all of a sudden going to start seeing hints of DeFi, or how exactly do you see traditional banks merging in to be the end of banks, to be neobanks, new banks?
Right. So let me give you a little picture of the landscape, what's happening. Beginning as we started this book, January 2021, I did a little scientific poll of all the bankers I knew, and I know quite a lot of them. And it turned out that almost nobody had ever heard of DeFi. This is only a year ago. DeFi? What's that? Okay. Mm-hmm. By the middle of last year, they had all heard of DeFi, but completely dismissed it, and these are just a bunch of kids playing around. By the beginning of this year, most of the banks, big global banks, have DeFi or blockchain initiatives in some area. Either they're giving their clients exposure to cryptocurrency, like Bank of America, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Paribas, ING. All of them are offering some allocated portion of their funds to go into those investments, either for their high net worth investors, but sometimes through the retail investors. Aave spots this opportunity. So Aave is a lend borrow initiative. It's now the biggest, Compound being very close behind. It is a product that allows you to lend and borrow different currencies with an automated market maker underneath, ensuring that these trades are liquid. They develop a white label version of Aave, an institutional version of Aave. I've forgotten what it's called. It's called Pro Aave or something. And all of a sudden you find banks all over the world snapping this thing up, learning how to use it, and offering it to their client bases. Because the truth is, we know, is that the average man in the street does not want to wrestle a big complex software machine to the ground. They have a hard enough time with their cell phones, which took years and years and years to sit there and try and wrangle a DeFi initiative. Once those DeFi initiatives are in the hands of banks, you have a bank with a value proposition that it never had before. Mm-hmm. The example that I like to use, and I'm not sure if it's available to United States citizens, but it may be, is most current accounts, checking accounts, will offer you less than 1% on your money in your checking account in your bank. If you open up your computer and you type nexo.com or abra.com or a bunch of others, you got 13% right there with no exposure to Bitcoin volatility or ETH volatility. It's 13% on a stable coin. It is a zero volatility, zero risk way to earn 13%. Now, the banks may say, well, it's not insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Company. But that's not the issue. The issue is that it's incredibly low risk, and you've got orders of magnitude greater return on your money, and they can't compete with that.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've spoken with Celsius and some of these major interest-bearing platforms that have billions of dollars now in stable coins and Bitcoin being staked and lending out inside of the platforms. And yeah, they just say that the banks can't compete, in part because, you know, the difference in percentage, they're using that to lend the money out to other people to make the money so they can make it instead of the everyday person.
Yeah, there's a bunch of other reasons why the banks can't compete. So I'll give you just two of them. If you get pissed off with your bank, as we all do all the time, our regular old-style traditional bank, there is a lot of friction in saying, well, I'm taking my money out and giving it to some other bank, because you've got to close accounts and they've got your credit card and they've got your mortgage and they've got your savings and checking deposit. You just give up. And the problem is, if you move it to another major traditional bank, you get more or less the same stuff. In the world of DeFi, that doesn't exist. You pull your money out of that project and put your money in that project. That was the catalyst behind Andre Cronje's YEarn. He looked at all these projects. This one was offering this percentage for 6 days, and then suddenly this one is offering a greater yield for so many days. And you ran a little program at the top that sniffed the horizon, okay? And it looked to see who was offering the highest yields for whatever project they were doing, pulled the cryptocurrency in there, dropped it there. As soon as that crypto started to drop its yields, it moved it somewhere else. He called it the world's smartest savings account. That product has no equivalent in the traditional world. It can't be built. Another reason why the bank can't compete. If you get a letter from your bank that says, well, we're raising your transaction fees on your checking account from 2.3% to 2.8%, you phone up and you say, listen, I don't agree with this. That transaction fee is too high. Could you show me the algorithm how you got this number? How do I know you're not ripping me off? Or you say, the interest rates you're offering me are not high enough and the loan amounts that you're getting on the other side are too high. I think that gap is too big. Please, can I see how you work your algorithms? I want to see your actuarial mathematics. They'll tell you to go take a hike because that's the IP.
Yeah.
In the world of DeFi, that completely collapses because obviously the smart contracts are open source. So anybody can look at them and see if they're fair. There's a whole bunch of issues within DeFi that make it incredibly difficult for a bank to say, we offer a better, fairer, and cheaper service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point, Stephen. And yeah, about Andre's YFI platform, you're right. You can move money so quickly between different interest-bearing platforms, and if the interest rate changes, there's no obligation to stay there. You can move, and it's your capital. You can move it really easily and quickly. So, all great points. By the way,
Andre is a co-countryman of mine. He's South African, and he built YEarn as a single programmer over a period of months. And I contacted him in the writing of this book, and I sent him my chapter on YEarn. The last person I wanted to make a mistake with was Andre, and he was kind enough to read the whole chapter and help me out in getting it right.
Amazing. Great to hear. And we don't have a lot of time left, Stephen, but for people that are interested in learning more, maybe give them one last reason why they really need to understand the information inside of this book.
Okay, so there is, and I know it's a bit of a cliche, there is a great sucking sound, and the great sucking sound is money flowing out of banks and traditional exchanges and traditional insurance companies into these new products. They are better for you and I, and they are worse for the people who have the financial power, the shareholders of the bank, and the people who sit with large executive salaries at the top. In order to fully understand that so that you can give your money the best chance to grow, it is necessary to have sort of a broad level understanding of all these projects. What we have tried to do in the book is do exactly that. You don't have to know how the smart contracts are written, but you've got to know why, make a DIO or Nexus Mutual or YEarn or Uniswap is better than the services that you are using now, and be able to rationalize that to anybody that you like, including your bank, and be able to understand how to move that money. And that's the level we've tried to pitch the book at.
Definitely. Well said. And for people around the world that are interested in picking up a copy, where's the best place to be able to get it?
Okay, so in most of the world, as of next week, it'll be on bookshelves. That'll be United States and United Kingdom and India and Singapore, Australia, South Africa, Canada, the English-speaking part of the world. It will be in other languages in a couple of months. It is on Amazon. You can type in my name. I have a bunch of novels in there, but this is my first non-fiction book. or Simon Dingle, my co-writer, or Beyond Bitcoin, it'll almost immediately come up. And it's on Waterstones in London. It's just about everywhere you'll find a major global release.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Stephen, for coming on the show. I will leave those Amazon links in the description box below for the viewers as well. I appreciate you taking the time to explain this, and it is really exciting stuff. The industry is moving so quickly, and there's so much to learn. So I appreciate you sharing your knowledge here. Thank you so much, and let's follow up in the near future.
Likewise, and thank you for letting me use your platform.